The distress signal from beyond Captain Elena Vasquez floated in the zero gravity of her ship's observation deck, watching the endless dance of stars through the reinforced viewport. The coffee in her magnetic cup had gone cold hours ago, but she kept taking small sips anyway. 3 years of deep space exploration had taught her that good coffee was precious, even when it tasted like recycled water and regret. The Resilience was humanity's newest deep space vessel, built for long-range exploration beyond the safety of Earth's solar system. Elena's crew of 15 consisted of scientists, engineers, and explorers who had volunteered for the dangerous mission of mapping unknown sectors of space. They were the best humanity had to offer, though Elena sometimes wondered if being the best simply meant being the most willing to fly into the unknown and probably die there. "Captain, you need to see this," called Dr. Marcus Webb from the communication station. His voice carried an excitement that made Elena push off from the viewport and glide over to him. Marcus was the ship's xenolinguist, a man who had spent his entire career studying theoretical alien languages that might not even exist. Elena anchored herself beside his workstation and looked at the displays. Waves of data scrolled across multiple screens, showing signal patterns unlike anything in their databases. "What am I looking at, Marcus?" "A transmission. Not random cosmic noise, not natural phenomena. This is artificial, structured communication." Marcus's hands moved quickly over his controls, isolating different frequency bands. "It's coming from approximately 60 light-years away, from a system our long-range scans show has at least 7 planets." The significance hit Elena immediately. 60 light-years was far beyond where any human ship had traveled. If this signal was artificial, it meant they had found evidence of alien intelligence. "How long has it been transmitting?" "Based on the signal degradation and our current position, I estimate it started broadcasting about 4 months ago." "Captain, there's something else." Marcus pulled up a new display showing the signal structure. "This isn't random chatter or exploration data. The patterns suggest urgency, repetition. If I had to guess, I'd say this is a distress call." Elena felt her stomach tighten. A distress call meant someone was in trouble, possibly dying while their message traveled through space, hoping someone would hear and care enough to help. She looked around the bridge at her crew. Chief Engineer David Park was running diagnostics on their faster-than-light drive. Security Chief Lieutenant Sarah Chen was reviewing tactical systems they had never expected to use. Navigator Amy Rodriguez was calculating jump coordinates to their next survey target. "Marcus, can you clean up the signal? Make it clearer?" "Already working on it. Give me 30 minutes. Those 30 minutes felt like hours. Elena gathered her senior staff in the ship's small conference room. The space was cramped, designed for efficiency rather than comfort, with a single table surrounded by chairs that could be locked in place during acceleration. Through the room's single viewport, stars wheeled slowly as the ship rotated to maintain artificial gravity. "We have a situation," Elena began, explaining what Marcus had discovered. She could see the excitement and worry in their faces as the implications became clear. Dr. Sarah Kim, their xenobiologist, leaned forward. "If this is really a distress call from an alien species, this changes everything. First contact protocols, scientific importance, the implications for humanity." "First contact protocols assume peaceful meeting," interrupted Lieutenant Chen. "A distress call suggests conflict. We don't know what we'd be flying into." Chief Park ran his hand through his graying hair. "Captain, with respect, we're an exploration ship. We have basic defensive systems and some mining charges, but we're not equipped for combat. If someone is in trouble with forces powerful enough to threaten an entire star system..." Elena understood their concerns. The Resilience was built for discovery, not war. They carried scientific equipment, not weapons. Their crew were researchers and explorers, not soldiers. Flying toward a distress call could mean flying toward their deaths. But Elena also understood something else about her crew and about humanity in general. They were the kind of people who heard someone calling for help and couldn't walk away, even when walking away was the smart thing to do. Marcus's voice came through the intercom. "Captain, I've got the signal cleaned up. You're going to want to hear this." They returned to the bridge where Marcus had prepared his analysis. I've managed to isolate the core message and run it through our linguistic analysis programs. I can't translate it perfectly, but I can give you the general meaning. He pressed a control and the speakers filled with sound unlike anything they had heard before. It was musical, almost like singing, but with undertones that made Elena's chest feel tight with sympathy. Even without understanding the words, she could hear fear, desperation, and hope all mixed together. The message repeats every 4 minutes and 23 seconds, Marcus explained. Near as I can tell, it's coming from something called the Zephyrian Empire. They're under attack by entities they refer to as the Void Hunters. Multiple worlds have already fallen. They're asking for help from anyone who can hear them. Brigader. Rodriguez looked up from her calculations. Captain, 60 light-years is a 3-week journey with our current drive system. That's assuming we don't run into any problems and our fuel holds out. What about our mission parameters? Asked Dr. Yates. Kim, we're supposed to be surveying the Kepler sector. Command is expecting regular reports. Elena stared at the star chart displayed on the main screen. Their planned route would take them through several systems over the next 6 months, gathering data and looking for signs of habitable worlds or useful resources. It was important work that could benefit all of humanity. But somewhere out there, people were dying while sending desperate messages into space, hoping someone would care enough to help. Marcus, can we send a reply? Let them know we received their message? I think so. It might take some time to figure out their communication protocols, but yes, Elena made her decision. Do it. Tell them help is coming. The bridge went quiet except for the soft hum of life support systems. Elena could see the questions in her crew's faces, the worry about what they were volunteering for. She didn't blame them. She was scared too. Captain, Chief Park said carefully, what exactly are we planning to do when we get there? We don't know anything about these Void Hunters or what we'd be fighting. We'll figure it out when we arrive, Elena replied. But we can't ignore a distress call. That's not who we are as humans, and it's not who we are as a crew. Lieutenant Chen nodded slowly. If we're doing this, we need to prepare. I'll inventory our defensive systems and see what we can improve. We have industrial fabrication equipment. Maybe we can build something useful. Dr. Kim was already pulling up files on her tablet. I'll research everything we know about space combat and alien psychology. If we're going to help these Zephyrians, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Navigator Rodriguez began entering new coordinates. I'll plot the most efficient course. Maybe I can shave a few days off the journey time. Marcus continued working on his translation programs. I'll keep trying to improve communication. The more we can talk to them, the better we can help. Over the next few hours, the Resilience transformed from a peaceful research vessel into something resembling a warship. Though a very small and inexperienced one, Chief Park and his engineering team worked to boost their defensive shields and improve their sensor arrays. Lieutenant Chen led efforts to convert some of their scientific equipment into crude weapon systems. The mining charges designed for asteroid sampling could potentially be used as explosives, and their industrial fabricators could produce simple projectile weapons. Dr. Kim studied every piece of information they had about conflict resolution and tactical analysis, trying to prepare for situations no human had ever faced. The other scientists worked to understand what they might be walking into, analyzing the signal patterns for clues about the attackers and the defenders. Meanwhile, Marcus made contact with the aliens. The process was slow and difficult, requiring patience and creativity to establish basic communication. The Zephyrians used concepts and references that didn't translate directly to human experience, but gradually a picture began to emerge. The Zephyrian Empire was actually a peaceful confederation of different species spread across dozens of worlds. They had been exploring space for thousands of years, building a civilization based on cooperation and scientific advancement. They had never encountered anything like the Void Hunters. The enemy appeared without warning 6 months ago, attacking the outer worlds of Zephyrian space with overwhelming force. They used advanced technology and what seemed like perfect tactical coordination. Every defense the Zephyrians mounted was quickly analyzed and countered. Every weapon they deployed was rendered useless within days as the attackers adapted their defenses. What made the Void Hunters truly terrifying was their systematic approach. They didn't just conquer worlds, they consumed them, stripping away everything useful and leaving empty husks behind. Entire populations disappeared, their fate unknown. The survivors could only flee deeper into Zephyrian space, sending desperate calls for help to anyone who might listen. "Captain, I've made contact with someone calling himself Ambassador Kethvar," Marcus reported after 2 days of communication attempts. "He's willing to talk directly with you." Elena positioned herself in front of the main communication screen as Marcus established the connection. The image that appeared was unlike anything she had imagined. Ambassador Kethvar looked like a cross between a large bird and a graceful humanoid, with iridescent feathers that shifted color in the light, and large, intelligent eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom and current fear in equal measure. "Captain Elena Vasquez of the human vessel Resilience," she said, hoping the translation system would convey her meaning accurately. "We received your distress call and are coming to help." The ambassador's feathered head tilted in what might have been surprise. "Human? This word is not known to us. Your species is not in our databases of spacefaring civilizations. We're new to deep space exploration," Elena explained. "Our world is called Earth, about 60 light-years from your position. We only recently developed the technology to travel between stars." "You traveled 60 light-years to answer the call? Of strangers?" There was something in the ambassador's tone that suggested amazement. "Your species must be either very brave or very foolish." Elena smiled. "Probably both. Can you tell me more about these Void Hunters? What are we facing?" The ambassador's feathers seemed to dim with sadness. "They are unlike anything in our experience. Perfect predators that adapt to every defense, counter every strategy. We have lost 17 worlds in 6 months. Our greatest military minds have tried everything they know. Nothing works. What do they want? Territory? Resources? They take everything and leave nothing. Not conquerors in any sense we understand, but consumers. They strip worlds bare and move on to the next target. At our current rate of loss, the Zephyrian Empire will fall within a year." Elena felt the weight of what they were volunteering for. These Void Hunters had defeated an advanced civilization with thousands of years of experience and hundreds of worlds' worth of resources. The Resilience was one small ship with 15 people who had never fought a war in space. But she also felt something else. Determination. The same stubborn human refusal to give up that had carried their species from caves to the stars. "Ambassador, we may be small and inexperienced, but we're coming to help. Sometimes the smallest force can make the biggest difference." Ambassador Kethvar was quiet for a moment. "Captain Vasquez, I must be honest with you. We have asked for help from every spacefaring species we know. Many expressed sympathy, but none were willing to risk their own worlds against the Void Hunters. You are the first to offer aid." That information hit Elena like a physical blow. An entire galaxy had heard the Zephyrians' call for help and decided it was too dangerous to get involved. Only humanity, the newest and weakest spacefaring species, had been willing to try. "Then I guess it's up to us," Elena said simply. The Resilience jumped to faster-than-light speed 3 hours later, leaving behind their planned survey route and flying toward a war they didn't understand against an enemy they had never seen. Behind them, Earth continued its orbit around a quiet yellow star, unaware that its children were racing across the galaxy to fight for strangers who had become friends. As the ship settled into its journey, Elena found herself back at the observation viewport, watching the stars streak past in patterns of light that resembled tears running down the face of space itself. In 3 weeks, they would arrive at the edge of Zephyrian space and discover what humanity could do when faced with the impossible. The coffee in her cup was still cold, but she drank it anyway. Some things were worth savoring, even when they tasted like recycled water and uncertainty. Chaos theory in action. The Resilience dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Zephyrian space, and Captain Elena Vasquez immediately understood why 17 worlds had fallen to the Void Hunters. Through the main viewport, space looked like a graveyard of shattered dreams and broken civilizations. Debris fields stretched as far as their sensors could detect. Pieces of ships that had once carried families, explorers, and defenders now drifted like metallic snow through the vacuum. Some fragments were still glowing from recent weapon impacts, suggesting battles had raged here within the last few days. The wreckage told a story of desperate last stands and overwhelming defeat. "My God," whispered Dr. Sarah Kim from her science station. "How many ships are we looking at?" Navigator Amy Rodriguez was running calculations on her displays. "Based on debris density and distribution patterns, I estimate this represents the destruction of over 3,000 vessels. Everything from small personal craft to massive military dreadnoughts." Elena felt her crew's mood shift as the reality of their situation became clear. They were 15 humans in one small ship, flying into a war zone where thousands of advanced alien vessels had already been destroyed. The logical thing to do would be to turn around and flee back to Earth, warning humanity to avoid this sector of space at all costs. But logic had never been humanity's strongest trait. "Marcus, can you contact Ambassador Kethvar? Let him know we've arrived." Their xenolinguist worked quickly to establish communication while the ship moved carefully through the debris field. The resilience was small enough to navigate between the larger pieces of wreckage, but Elena could see impact craters on some fragments that were bigger than their entire vessel. The main screen flickered to life, showing Ambassador Kethvar's familiar bird-like features. But the proud, graceful being they had spoken with weeks ago now looked exhausted and desperate. His iridescent feathers had lost their luster, and his large eyes held the hollow look of someone who had seen too much death. "Captain Vasquez, you actually came." There was amazement in his translated voice. "I confess I had begun to doubt. We have lost 3 more worlds since our last communication." "We're here to help," Elena said simply. "What's the current situation?" Ambassador's image was replaced by a tactical display showing the Zephyrian Empire. What had once been a thriving confederation of 47 worlds was now reduced to fewer than 30. Red markers indicated worlds that had fallen to the Void Hunters, while yellow markers showed planets currently under attack. "The enemy follows the same pattern every time," Ambassador Kethvar explained. "They arrive in overwhelming force, establish orbital dominance within hours, then begin systematic consumption of all resources. Our fleets respond with conventional tactics. We establish defensive perimeters, coordinate our attacks, use our most advanced weapons." Elena studied the tactical data. "And they adapt to everything you do. Within hours, sometimes minutes. Every weapon we deploy becomes useless once they analyze it. Every formation we use becomes a liability once they understand it. They fight with perfect efficiency and complete predictability." Dr. Marcus Webb looked up from his communication station. "Captain, I'm getting reports from their frontline commanders. The Void Hunters always attack the same way. Perfect formations, optimal targeting priorities, maximum efficiency. It's like fighting a computer program." Elena felt something click in her mind. She had seen this pattern before, not in warfare but in her early training simulations. Programs designed to test human responses by using perfect tactical analysis and optimal strategies. The programs always won against other programs, but human players had found ways to beat them by doing things that didn't make logical sense. "Ambassador, I need to speak with your military commanders. All of them as soon as possible." An hour later, the main screen showed a conference call with a dozen Zephyrian military leaders. They were a diverse group representing different species within their confederation. Some looked like Ambassador Kethvar's bird-like people. Others resembled walking trees or living crystals. And a few had forms Elena couldn't easily categorize. What they all shared was the exhausted look of beings who had fought a losing war with everything they had. "Honored commanders," Elena began, "I've studied your battle reports and tactical analyses. You've been fighting these Void Hunters exactly the way they expect you to fight." General Thysera, a crystalline being whose body reflected light in prismatic patterns, responded with what the translation system rendered as confused irritation. "Captain Vasquez, we have been fighting with proven tactics developed over centuries of military science. These are the most effective methods known to our civilization." "That's exactly the problem," Elena replied. Effective methods are predictable methods. The Void Hunters can analyze and counter anything that follows logical patterns. Commander Vextar, one of the tree-like beings, leaned forward. His voice creaked like wind through old branches. Are you suggesting we should fight ineffectively? Use inferior tactics that make no strategic sense? Elena smiled. That's exactly what I'm suggesting. The silence that followed was profound. Elena could see the confusion and disbelief in their alien faces. These were military professionals who had spent their lives studying warfare, and she was asking them to abandon everything they knew. Let me show you something, Elena said. She gestured to Lieutenant Sarah Chen, who brought up a display showing human military history. My species has been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've learned something important. The best way to defeat a superior enemy is to make them fight your kind of war, not theirs. The display showed examples from Earth's history. Ancient battles where smaller forces used terrain and unconventional tactics to defeat larger armies. Modern conflicts, where guerrilla fighters frustrated technologically superior enemies by refusing to fight according to conventional rules. The Void Hunters win because they force you to fight logically, Elena continued. They analyze your optimal tactics and develop perfect counters. But what if you stopped using optimal tactics? What if you did things that made no sense whatsoever, General So? Lysara's crystalline form shifted colors, indicating deep thought. You are proposing tactical chaos, deliberate inefficiency. I'm proposing humanity's greatest military advantage, Elena said. We're really good at being unpredictable. Over the next several hours, Elena and her crew worked with the Zephyrian commanders to develop a completely new approach to fighting. The Void Hunters. Instead of efficient formations, they would use random groupings that changed constantly. Instead of optimal weapon deployment, they would mix advanced energy weapons with primitive projectile guns and improvised explosives. Chief Engineer David Park contributed insights about human engineering philosophy. We don't just use the best tool for the job. We use whatever we have available and make it work somehow. Duct tape, improvised repairs, jury-rigged solutions that shouldn't work but do. Dr. Sarah Kim added psychological warfare concepts. Humans are really good at doing things for emotional reasons rather than logical ones. We take unnecessary risks, make dramatic gestures, and sometimes fight just because we're angry. The Zephyrian commanders struggled to understand these concepts. Their entire military tradition was based on logical analysis, optimal resource allocation, and efficient execution. The idea of deliberately choosing inferior tactics was almost incomprehensible to them. I will be honest, admitted Commander Vextar. This approach terrifies me more than the Void Hunters do. You are asking us to abandon everything we know about warfare. I'm asking you to try something they've never seen before, Elena replied. Something they can't analyze or predict because it doesn't follow any rules. The test came sooner than expected. While they were still planning their unconventional strategy, alerts began sounding throughout the Zephyrian command center. A void hunter fleet had appeared at the edge of the Koro system, moving toward the inhabited world with their usual systematic precision. 27 enemy vessels, reported the sensor operator. Standard Void Hunter formation. They'll establish orbital control within 6 hours. Elena looked at the tactical display showing both fleets. The Zephyrian response force consisted of 43 ships of various sizes and capabilities. Under normal circumstances, they would form defensive lines, coordinate their attacks, and try to destroy the enemy through superior firepower and tactical positioning. Instead, Elena suggested something that made every military professional in the room cringe. Split your fleet into random groups, don't coordinate anything. Have each group attack different targets at different times using different weapons. Make no overall plan except to confuse the enemy as much as possible. General Thisara's crystalline form darkened with what Elena had learned was their equivalent of a frown. Captain, what you describe is not warfare. It is chaos. Exactly. The Battle of Koros became legendary in Zephyrian military history, though not for reasons any of them expected. Instead of the usual precise military engagement, the battle resembled a cosmic bar fight where everyone was drunk and fighting for different reasons. 5 Zephyrian ships attacked the Void Hunter formation head-on, but not in formation and not at the same time. They came from different angles using different speeds and opened fire with whatever weapons they happened to have charged at the moment. 8 more ships ignored the main fleet entirely and attacked individual Void Hunter vessels with boarding parties armed with primitive weapons and improvised explosives. A group of smaller vessels began ramming attacks, not because it was tactically sound, but because their crews were angry about lost homes and dead families. The remaining Zephyrian ships did something unprecedented. They retreated in random directions, then returned to attack from completely different angles using weapons the Void Hunters had never seen before. The result was magnificent chaos. The Void Hunter fleet, designed to analyze and counter optimal tactics, found itself facing an enemy that had no tactics at all. Their perfect formation algorithms couldn't predict random attacks. Their weapon analysis systems couldn't develop counters for impromptu strategies that changed every few minutes. Elena watched the battle from the Resilience, which was technically not supposed to be there at all, but had joined the fight anyway because it seemed like the right thing to do. Their small ship darted between the larger vessels, using mining charges as improvised weapons and targeting systems that couldn't possibly exist. "Captain," called Dr. Webb from his station, "I'm monitoring Void Hunter communications. Their coordination systems are showing error cascades. They can't process what we're doing." Elena smiled as she watched a Zephyrian cruiser make a completely irrational attack run that somehow succeeded in disabling 3 enemy ships. "That's because we're not doing anything. We're just being human." The battle lasted 14 hours, far longer than any previous engagement with the Void Hunters. More importantly, when it was over, the Zephyrian forces had achieved something unprecedented. They had won. 17 Void Hunter ships were destroyed or disabled. The remaining 10 retreated in what appeared to be confusion, breaking off their attack on Koros and withdrawing to regroup. It was the first time anyone had seen the Void Hunters retreat from anything. The aftermath of the battle brought representatives from across the galaxy to study what had happened. Species that had refused to help the Zephyrians suddenly wanted to learn about human tactical philosophy. Military academies began teaching courses on chaotic warfare theory and the strategic value of unpredictability. But Elena knew the real lesson was simpler than any academic theory. Sometimes the smallest force could achieve the impossible by refusing to accept that anything was impossible. Sometimes beings who had no business winning could triumph by fighting in ways that made no sense to anyone, including themselves. Ambassador Kethavar visited the Resilience a week after the battle. His feathers had regained their iridescent shine, and his eyes held hope instead of despair. "Captain Vasquez, how do we thank you? Your species has given us something we had lost, the ability to surprise our enemies." Elena was back at her favorite viewport, drinking coffee that was still cold but somehow tasted better than it had in weeks. "You don't need to thank us, Ambassador. Helping each other is what civilized beings do. The galaxy will remember what humanity accomplished here," the ambassador said. "When the Void Hunter struck, everyone else calculated the odds and chose safety. Only humans looked at impossible odds and chose to try anyway." Elena watched stars wheel past the viewport, no longer looking like tears in space, but like points of light marking the paths between worlds where different species were learning to work together. Somewhere out there, the Void Hunters were probably analyzing what had happened at Koros, trying to develop counters for tactics that had no structure to counter. She hoped they never figured it out. The galaxy was a better place when the smallest, most illogical force could still make the biggest difference. The Resilience would stay in Zephyrian space for another month, helping to train their military in the art of productive chaos. Then they would return to Earth with stories of first contact, interstellar war, and the discovery that humanity's greatest strength was their refusal to fight fair. But that was a story for another day. For now, Elena was content to drink terrible coffee and watch the stars, knowing that somewhere in the vast darkness people were safe because 15 humans had decided that impossible odds were just another kind of challenge to overcome. The galaxy had learned something important. When Deathworlders answered the call, even the stars themselves might tremble with the consequences.